listeners. You found yourself to the best podcast out there, rated by me, number one, Destination Aviation. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Jeff Miller. Or if you're coming back and this isn't your first time here, thank you for joining us. And thank you for returning. I think I did that in the right order. I don't know. Either way, you're listening. You'll tell me while you're traveling or going where you need to. Our last episode, we left off on the 4th of July, so I hope everybody still has their digits on their hands. Let's see on mine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. Oh, 10. Okay, good. I hope everybody's festivities were good. I'm still on vacation, so this episode will drop on my vacation. But we're talking here with Lauren Carter, and she is a student at the North Dakota University, or University of North Dakota. You guys tell me which way it is. If I'm wrong, if I'm right, send me an email on it. But no, we're going to talk today. She's going to put me in the hot seat a little bit and kind of reverse the questions, because everybody always says I love to talk. So I do. That's why I have a podcast, so I can talk, and I can talk about whatever I want. Whatever I want to come out of my mouth right now, I can talk about. But I'm just so grateful that you want to listen to it. So I will listen to you if you ever want to send us a line and tell us what maybe you want to see differently on the show or what you could talk about on the show. But today, what I will say about this that's really exciting is it's the first time on this podcast where I kind of get interviewed, so I do like that. And also, too, you know, we go to a lot of presentations and we hear people's kind of perfect version of themselves or their perfect version of their career, and it's linear, and I did this, this, and this, and I got this promotion. It looks very much like a LinkedIn profile. Today, we're going to have a real conversation because as I kind of see it, your growth isn't always linear. You're going to have some zigs and zags along the way. And Lauren does a good job of getting some of that out of me. So without further ado, Lauren Carter from North Dakota University of North Dakota. Tell me I'm right or wrong. Well, Lauren Carter, welcome to Destination Aviation.
Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being on here. We met, I think, in Atlanta, right, at the AAAE Annual American Association of Airport Executives?
Yes, we had lunch together.
And you are currently, what year are you in with, you're North Dakota, right? University of North Dakota, did I get that correct?
Yes, you did. I'm starting my third year, and I'm going to be graduating this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you, so, because we do have a lot of listeners that are in the industry, what's your major? What are you graduating in?
I'm majoring in aviation management with a specialization in air transportation services.
Oh, that's fantastic. So obviously we all start our career, we have an idea of where we go, and sometimes life takes us different directions. But if you could say, this is exactly what I want to start my career as, what would that be?
Right now, network planning kind of has my heart.
Okay. And any particular airline or any one of them?
I would love to do it for an airport, ideally, but I know that means I kind of have to go. I know that means I have to go to the airlines.
Okay. So you're more like air service development for a particular airport. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that would be so cool. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. So we met, I think you came, or however it came about, we were eating at the same lunch table in Atlanta, correct? You and some other students?
Yes.
And how did you, are you an actual AAAE chapter there? Or what made you think I want to go to the annual? And then secondly, was that your first annual?
Yes, that was my first annual conference. And I went to the UND chapter. Okay. And my professor, Kim Kendall, who runs the chapter, she just said it was a good opportunity to meet people. And I was really nervous about going, but
it is.
I went. Yeah.
No, it's a good opportunity. I've often said this about going to a conference like that is you get to meet a lot of amazing people. You can also kind of zero in on, maybe if you're lucky enough to want to work at a particular airport that you get in at that airport. I think one of the benefits is if you're not geographically, I want to be in this spot, but you're willing to move around, that's usually more beneficial to your career. But the nice thing is you pretty much get to meet everybody. And the other thing that I've always said is you also get to meet those people you're like, there's no way in heck I want to work at that airport. And I can say that at my point in my career. But and maybe I'm one of those airports for you, I don't know. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm, of course, always going to ask questions that I ask because that's what I do on my podcast. But I think today, Lauren, you're going to ask me some questions, right? And put me in the hot seat a little bit.
Yes, I am. Fantastic. It might come off as an interview, but
I'm okay with an interview. Now, I guess just so the listeners, because we have listeners across the spectrum, whether they're in the industry or a lot of them that are not in the industry. So you found a college, now obviously me being in the industry, I know University of North Dakota is one of the best schools out there for what you're looking to get into. But why did you choose there? Maybe were you just a quick brief for people that are listening. Who is Lauren Carter and how did you get to this point in your career? I should say educational career, because you're about to lift off in your actual career.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm from Sacramento, California originally.
Okay.
I decided I knew I wanted to go into business, and I found out aviation had so many jobs that are not talked about. And I was like, wait, I could do this for a living? Like, this is really cool. And then I just kind of kept researching, and I found like airport management. I think when I applied to UND, I didn't actually know like what the major like even meant, but I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. So
That seems fair. I think we all kind of had that same thing, right? When I was younger, I was going into radiology actually, and I was working at the airport, but you don't really understand it, right? And I'm like, there's got to be someone that like points and says a ticket counter should go over there. And I remember I had a realization in my own career when I worked in Laredo, Texas, that one day when we were bringing in a new airline, I was like, oh, the ticket counter should go over there. And I was like, let's come full circle. Look at that. So,
yeah.
but I love that. So when you were in Sacramento and you had that initial thought, like aviation, was there a family member or something that was in aviation, or did it just come down cascading from the sky to you like, aviation? Or was there any
I
moment?
think it was from the sky. I don't
Okay.
My friend was like, one of my friend's dads is like a pilot. Like, what if you did that? And I was like, no, I could never do something like that. Like, that doesn't sound attainable. And then I like looked into it and I was like, wait, I don't have to be a pilot. There's so many jobs in aviation that are not talked about at all. All you think about is pilot, flight attendant, and then that's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe air traffic controller if you're really diving deep. But yeah.
Well, I love it because we need people like you behind the scenes working at airports, talent to run these places. And I've worked at 8 airports, and I know you're going to ask me several questions here coming up, but it is very rewarding. So I'm really happy that someone like you, young talent, wants to get into this side of the business because we need that for sure, especially as people. I'm seeing it now, this next year will be 25 years for me in aviation. And a lot of those people that I knew at the beginning, either they're retiring out now, and all these new jobs are opening up across the spectrum. So it's a good time to get into the industry. So you hit the right spot. So I'm glad there. Now, when you do graduate, is it next year? Is that what you said you graduate? I'm sorry. When do you graduate?
Yeah, May 2026.
May
Yeah.
2026. Okay. So in May 2026, where's Lauren want to go? What do you want to do? Is there everything's
I don't
open?
know. I'm not tied down.
You're
I'm
not.
like, if I've conquered North Dakota, I can do anything at this point.
That seems fair. So is all your family back in Sacramento?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So would that be at least a logical spot you may want to go? Or like you said, this doesn't really matter.
Not necessarily, no. I
Okay.
mean, for starting out in my career, I don't know if California is where I want to go. I know it's expensive, so
Yeah.
I mean,
At least
maybe like I'll end my career there maybe, but
well, at least
starting out,
you
yeah,
would be in a decent spot of the state, right? Sacramento. I mean, I know it's still expensive, but it's less expensive than the rest of the state, right?
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But no, I'm honestly just like gonna throw a dart at like the map of the 50 states and just go there.
That's perfect. Well, I think you'll be very successful with that logic because, in my career, and I know we haven't gotten to my part of it yet, but in my career, I think that that's been one of the bigger benefits for me being able to move up is that I'm not tied geographically to a certain area. I did grow up in the Midwest, which is where my nasally accent comes from, and I seem to have navigated back towards it. But yeah, I think that that's a good perspective to have on the industry. So with AAA being in Atlanta, what would you say was your favorite part? Was that your first real aviation conference?
Yes, it was. I
Okay.
had gone to the NATCA conference for air traffic
Yeah.
controllers,
Yep.
in November. That was like my first conference ever.
So that would
And
be
I
just
didn't really know what I was doing.
no. I think hey, you sound like you know exactly what you're doing. And just for our listeners, because I know we love our acronyms in this, it's National Air Traffic Controller Association, something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And they're the union that represents air traffic controllers.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was like my basis for going to Atlanta. And I mean, Atlanta like blew my expectations out of the water. I had such a good time.
Yeah, I love that. So I know you didn't come listen to me speak, so obviously that couldn't be your favorite session. But what was it? I mean, who maybe did you have, I don't even want to make anybody feel off that you met. So let's not say your favorite person because you met a lot of people and you may get a job from one of these people. So I won't ask you who your favorite person was, but what was the highlight? Was it just networking? What was the highlight for you for the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an extrovert, so just getting to talk to so many people and ask them questions was great. And I did meet my mentor, Tim O'Donnell, at Bluegrass Airport,
Oh, that's fantastic. I love
and we still are like talking to this day. So it's really good. We got so lucky because I was expecting like the mentor matchup to be this like detailed, like somebody like put our resumes together and matched us up. No, we both got in a line and we met in the middle, and it just
that.
happened that he also went to UND. So it just
Uh,
worked out great. But
I love
yeah,
that. I know we haven't gotten to my questions yet, so this will be a surprise for you, but I used to work for Tim.
I I know. I asked him. I was
Oh,
like, "Do
did
I do
you?
this podcast? I'm nervous."
What did he say? Let's just put you on the spot now.
He said you're a fantastic person.
Ah, that's awfully nice of Tim. Thank you, Tim, if you're listening. No, I appreciate that. Well, that's good though. So he's learning you all about Lexington Bluegrass Airport and career and UND, and that's great. That's fantastic. So moving from that now into where we're standing now with these questions, I want to let you have an open mic, and you can ask me whatever you want.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
first question is, what's something that you wish more people knew about the general aviation side of things? Because I feel like commercial service gets all of the attention and gets all of the fame. And I don't know too much about the general aviation side of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I appreciate that question and the perspective on it. I will say with general aviation, uh, you know, we have unintended barriers, I think, on our side of this part of aviation because um, first off, in my career, this is the first general aviation airport strictly that I've worked for. There's more general aviation airports in the United States than any other category airport by a lot, actually. So we have over 19,000 airports in the United States, of which 500 roughly are commercial service. The rest are like Chicago Executive Airport, where it's general aviation. And so when people go by, the reason why I say unintended barriers is, you go to your point about it gets all the attention, right? Which, you're going on Spirit, you go to O'Hare and you go to Orlando or whatever you're doing. You drive by an airport like ours and you're like, what's this, Signature and Atlantic, and for those that don't know, those are fixed base operators, which are kind of gas stations for the sky. But especially if we go to the high school stuff and people want to get into it, a couple of things with it, what you touched on earlier. If you do want to be a pilot, that's fantastic. That's great. And working for the airlines is fantastic as well. But, the largest aircraft operator in the world is actually NetJets, which, is a 135 charter operator. And so whether you want to be a pilot in general aviation, which gives you I think sometimes you can get a better work-life balance, whether you're flying for a charter operator or you're flying for a private company that flies under Part 91. You want to be a mechanic, you want to be a flight instructor, you want to be Jeff Miller, you want to be an airport manager. I think that, it gives people a lot more flexibility and latitude. And I will say this is the funnest job that I've had. No offense to the other jobs that I've done, but I truly do love how we operate. And really, we get a chance to bring people in because a lot of times, right, you look at a commercial airport and they look like a prison, right? And they need to for security sometimes, right? That you see the rolled barbed wire at some of these facilities, and they have to do it in some right, because they have to protect what's in there. But there's also it doesn't complete this kind of warm, inviting place for people, young people like yourself, to be like, oh, that's my local airport. Let me go and learn to fly. So, especially in like our region here in Chicago, you're not going to go learn to fly at O'Hare. There's no flight schools. It's not the way it works. So and we need O'Hare and we need those type of airports, but we also need airports like ours that can be an incubator to train the youth to want to get into these roles. And so I really love that we can have that connection. We have 9 flight schools at the airport that I'm at. So people could come out, they can learn to fly. You can come back and be a mechanic with us. And so there's so many of these resources. And especially if you're younger like yourself and you want to get into the general aviation side to it, just the sheer amount of airports that are out there, it gives you an interesting kind of dynamic and I feel like a closer connection to aviation than maybe I've had at some of these commercial airports. And so again, it was interesting for me because making that switch from commercial to strictly general aviation, I too was like, well, I don't know, but looking back on, I love it. I do. I really enjoy the job, and I enjoy getting involved with a lot of our programs at our airport. We have a lot of community outreach. We do a ton of tours. I know a lot of especially the medium hub airports, and even the large one. O'Hare does a really good job of reaching out to the youth. But again, we all kind of serve our purpose within the system. And for general aviation, the biggest thing that I would like people to know is everything that you can do at a commercial airport, you can really do at our airport. If you want to be that pilot, you can do it at a GA airport. And a lot of these smaller businesses that start up, whether you're maintenance or whether you do have a smaller fixed base operator, they're again a spot to really allow that nurturing of aviation in the United States. And when I worked in Laredo, Texas, we would have a lot of people come up from Mexico to learn to fly in the United States, because in Mexico, if they were going out for flight instruction and there was a commercial flight, they may get put in a penalty box and have to wait, because it's like in Mexico, it's not a just system with the airspace. So if you're flying commercial, you're more important than maybe Jeff Miller learning to fly. And so people come to the United States to shoot an ILS, to come in an RNAV approach, because our system is open and free and lets everybody use it. And so again, it's kind of general aviation, especially in the United States, I would say is the envy of the world, because we do have an immense amount of resources. And it's, like in my job, I am the executive director of the airport, but for recreation, I fly. And so I get to go to some of these little airports around me as well. And it's always so much fun. So go to your local airport, hang out, get to know people. There's such an amazing spot to really find some history in aviation, and then, learn what you want to do with it too, because I found at a larger airport, sometimes you get siloed into a particular job. And if you look back at my resume, there's some really good silo jobs, but really good jobs to really focus on whatever it was, like airport operations. But in this role, I get to kind of wear a lot of hats and figure out, well, I want to be a little involved with this. I want to go down to the high school on career day. So it's a lot of fun. A big, long answer, but a lot of airports, and I feel like I want to do it justice. Any follow-up questions to that one, Lauren?
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about what your responsibilities, your day-to-day responsibilities are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm the executive director at Chicago Executive Airport, and really at the end of the day, we're the landlord for all of our private industry at the airport. Whether you're developing, a hangar for your aircraft, if you're a community hangar, we talked about fixed base operators. There's 2 big players in the fixed base operator space. One is Atlantic, and the other one is Signature Flight Support. Both those have a good chunk of the market. I want to say Signature's over 2 to 250 locations worldwide, and Atlantic's around 140. But Atlantic went from, I think they recently sold over the last few years for around $5 billion, and now they're asking, or potentially asking, $10 billion. There's a lot of scuttlebutt out there about different articles that they may be for sale. I don't think they've officially said they're for sale, but you have these multi-billion-dollar companies that come in and they build hangars, and really the idea there, right, is that they're working with end users to put their aircraft in. And then the same with our flight school. So if you want to come to the airport and you want to start a business, you come and talk to me and our office and our staff, because we manage the facility for the communities that own it. So we're owned by 2 different communities, the village of Wheeling and the city of Prospect Heights. And so through those processes, we make sure that our airport remains self-sustaining. We're not a burden to the taxpayer. And our two main funding streams are land development. So everything we do, we develop with usually a private developer. You want to come in and build X project, right? You want to build something. I work with you on that lease. I work with you on the terms of that lease. So does the team at the airport. And then the same with fuel flowage. When you're any fuel that's put into the ground at the airport gets a percentage of that. And so those are our two really main revenue streams to make sure the airport's operating. And as the airport operator, right, we have a whole team dedicated to snow removal, maintenance, ensuring that when Jeff Miller lands in his 172, that the runway surface is intact and in good shape. And so a lot of our job is, my side of it is economic development. And then the other part to it is, really maintaining the facility and ensuring that when people come in and use it, it's operating the way that it should. We work to get grants in, so that's a big part of the job. So federal grants, state grants. Most of our projects that we do are derived from the Airport Improvement Program with, a funding source under the Federal Aviation Administration. So, right now we're rebuilding a ramp. That was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's about a $2.6 million project. We're redesigning taxiways. So we work with our engineering firm, not that the airport was designed incorrectly to begin with, but design standards change over time. So you do, a 5-year capital outlay. So a lot of that is working with state legislators, federal legislators, but every day is a little bit different, and like this Saturday, we have a 5K at the airport. So we get out and we have over 1,000 people run on the airfield, which sounds simple, but it's a lot of planning from our team. I don't necessarily do that directly, but a lot of planning from our team to get everybody out there, to get them on the airfield. And then at night, we have a rock event that the communities put on where we bring out live bands, food trucks, and fireworks. And the airport's closed, so it's really an opportunity, one, to say thank you to all of our tenants over the last year, because it's really the only time they get to slow down for a moment. And then also invite the community out to the airport, because as I said from the beginning, that kind of unintended barriers, some of that is just access, right? And people trying to understand what we do. So we have the flight schools out there. So one, I can learn to fly here, and then we also have a good internship program as well. So it's again, it's an incubator for bringing in the youth to say, hey, this is a great career path. You can be here at an airport like Chicago Executive, whether you want to go to the airlines or another airport. We all serve within the same system, but I wouldn't discount a general aviation airport. It's a very rewarding career field to be in, especially if you have a love for aviation. Sometimes, at other jobs, I would kind of lose that connection. But here, I try to fly every couple of weeks out of the airport that I'm at, and that gives me an opportunity to stay close to it. So along, again, kind of picture of what I'm doing at our airport, but it's really about, being that kind of connection point between a lot of different businesses at the airport. Our air traffic control tower is federally staffed. So working with our air traffic manager, we're an international airport. So we have a customs and border patrol officer. Again, we're that kind of middle point of connecting everyone. And, a lot of the time, if you don't know I exist, that means I did my job, right? Your plane landed, you got off, you got into a nice facility, and you did what you needed to do. And so a lot of times I take that as a compliment if somebody's like, oh, I didn't know your role existed. Well, that's because it works so well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, in Atlanta, like learning about properties and
Yeah.
like the real estate side of things, I did not know that was a thing. And I learned about that in Atlanta, and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. This sounds like something I might want to go into.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding part to it because you can kind of, especially in the development side of an airport, you can really see, in reality what you've done and, whether you're working with a company to build a facility. At Chicago Executive Airport, we signed an agreement with the company Sky Harbor. They're going to build 34,000 square foot hangars. And this is a whole redesign of a space on the airfield that's currently tie downs and a runway. And so we're working with our engineers on many different levels, environmental assessments. We have a whole team internally working on it, but it's a really good opportunity for, one, our airport staff, because like I said, our goal always is to remain self-sustaining. We've never been a burden on the taxpayer, which, most general aviation airports do need subsidy from whatever their local government is. So most airports in the United States are owned and operated by some government entity, right? So whether that's a county or city, whatever it might be. But if you get into some of these smaller airports, usually there's a subsidy, right? There's a $500,000 or something to do a local match on things like a taxiway development or runway. But, we're fortunate, like in the airport that I'm at, that we geographically are located next to a large city center. People want to be at our airport. So it's very easy usually to work to develop land. And we kind of, in our case, it's not so much somebody wanting to be there. We have people that want to be there. It's with our airport, we're kind of landlocked. And so we have to redevelop areas to make it work better, like we're doing right now, right? It's all kind of layered right now. Like when I look out of my office, I can see, 18 wheeler after 18 wheeler bringing in rock and stone to the ramp that we're building. And what I talked about before when we were mentioning about leasing, it's really cool to see actually, oh, we did the grant paperwork and, we went through and we did the lease and now everything's kind of falling in place. We bought an old hotel through that process and just seeing, this old hotel that once in 1967 was a pretty nice hotel. We have a nice postcard of it, but fast forward to 2025, not so much anymore. And so ripping down that hotel and turning that into an aeronautical development, those are really cool things to see. And I think if your career, you'll find it really rewarding if you get into that leasing side. And a lot of times these airports too, if you want to be in that same track of where I say network planning is a term usually the airlines use, but to the point that you made earlier, it seems a lot of that falls in line with air service development at an airport. And so if you're doing air service development, a lot of these airports leasing can kind of just go hand in hand with that because you're really working towards a commercial airport, bringing in an airline, right? And there's a whole slew of stuff we could talk about with that, but another complement to that, right? A lot of times, right, maybe they want a hangar to put the aircraft in. When Cape Air was flying into O'Hare, they were looking for hangar space for their Technums, right? And so we ended up working a deal with them through one of our FBO partners to be in our hangar, even though they were flying out of O'Hare. So again, you kind of get involved in these projects and stuff that make it really exciting and fun. And that side to it, you can really see like, oh, I put a lease together and look, they're building a building. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good segue into my next question, which is, what's your favorite part of your job and then your least favorite part of your job?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. Thanks, Lauren. I would say probably, honestly, at this point in my career, I love seeing other folks that have come through our programs and are succeeding. We have, a couple interns that went up to Milwaukee, General Mitchell, and they're working now. And every time I see, I think Steven, I'll just say his first name. I don't know if people don't want to say anything about him, but I see him rise up the ranks and move into different roles and leadership roles. And so I think that's really cool and rewarding that, he went to our program. He worked with our staff to develop the skills to put him into that position. We have another who was one of our interns, Jack, who's now down in Asheville, working at the airport there. Someone I think flying, American, KC 135s. So it's just, there's this, level of people come into the airport, they kind of learn, okay, this is the direction I want to go. Cause we're all in that same boat, right? I just did it a little bit earlier than you're doing it. But, when you get into it, you don't have all the answers and you're trying to figure it out. And I love, like our internship really allows people to go out and explore, to get to talk to, the person that owns the flight school, to talk to the air traffic controllers and figure out, hey, this is my pathway. Obviously, I have an affection towards people that like, getting to aviation management because a lot of the stuff you mentioned up at the beginning, that's usually a part of the industry that people forget. Oh, I could be that airport operator. But so that's really rewarding. I would say a lot of times, and I'm not even saying necessarily it's the worst part of the job, but, we're all human beings and you take stuff with you when you leave the office, right? And, the reality of an airport is not everybody loves an airport, right? And, you're in somebody's backyard and maybe it's noise, or maybe it's something to do with pollution. And so you have to kind of justify the existence of the airport. And it's not even necessarily it's a bad part of the job. It's just, when if you're coming into a role like this, and like we have a public meeting every month, very rarely does someone decide they want to come to say something. Oh, that you're doing a great job. Usually if somebody comes, they have, a comment that they want to make, that something that maybe they don't like the way it's going. And, you take that with you, because a little for myself, because you're like, okay, how can we work better with our community, be a better neighbor? And so sometimes that weighs on my mind, because obviously I want people to feel like they like our mission and what we're doing. And so not even this is because it's so hard to say, oh, I don't like this part of the job. And not even necessarily getting to that with this. It's just, it's a part of the job that, not everybody's going to come to you and say, hey, Lauren, you run the airport. Thanks. Some people may come and say, hey, Jeff, you run the airport. I'm going to put the airport up your butt, which has been said to me before. And I'm being polite when I say but. But, and that type of person, it's hard to, have probably a further conversation about the benefits of the airport. Most people, you can usually find some middle ground and try to work with them on how the airport may be impacting their life negatively, and try to find a pathway forward. So, again, it is, but it also builds a lot of skill, right? Because, when you go, like when I was at AAAE, I did a speaking engagement there. Again, Lauren, thanks for coming. I'm kidding. I did a speaking engagement. But the crowd is generally okay. Tim O'Donnell wasn't out there to heckle me. So the crowd, the crowd technically was okay. But, like in a board meeting sometimes, right, you may have 4 or 5 people that don't like you, right, that will have their arms crossed and stare at you. But it does build a lot of skills, right? Because if you have to do a conversation in front of someone that doesn't like your messaging, every once in a while I can get them to laugh, if I say something silly enough. But, again, it's about building relationships. And honestly, one of the individuals, they just asked me last week about an internship for someone that they know to work at the airport. So I see that as a success, that maybe, there's some things about the airport they don't like. And then, oh, but you know what, there is some benefit here. And that's about our messaging and everything else that we're doing. Then it's like, hey, like yourself, Lauren, or like me at one point in my life, hey, this looks like a really rewarding career field. Could, somebody I know get involved with it? So, I hope that I skated that what do you not like best question as much as I could there.
I think you did a great job.
All right, yeah. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that.
I also was kind of wondering, so in your career overall, this doesn't have to be just at Chicago Executive, but what is something that you look back on, like a project or just anything that you are particularly proud of?
Particularly proud of. It's interesting because there's a lot of stuff that you're like, oh, that was a cool project. I don't know if I have one in my mind that was particular. There's a lot of stuff that you do. Like when I was in Laredo, I was kind of new to the air service development side of, airports. Where I was before that, I was in Pittsburgh and San Jose. That wasn't really my wheelhouse. In Pittsburgh, I did work with the air service development team, but they took kind of the heavy lifting of that. And when I was in Laredo, they wanted Mexico City service since the beginning of really time. They had it here and there, kind of in different intervals, but generally speaking, they didn't have an air carrier going to Mexico City. So we were able to work a deal with Aeromar Airlines, and that was that moment where I told you, like, oh, somebody has to tell you where the ticket counter is going to go. And I'm like, how about over here? And so that was really cool. And that was a nice environment to really learn, oh, this is air service development. Because a lot of times at airports, air service development is, it's really one-sided, and you feel like you're speed dating when you go. I've had airlines, like you put together a little packet, right? And you go and you may get 10 or 15 minutes to kind of pitch what your airport is, where the community is. And I've said this on another podcast, but I've had an airline representative just open the packet, and this is the sound. He went, ugh. It's like, and again, you're like, whoa,
Oh my
okay,
God.
yeah. Um, but, getting, putting that project through, flying down, with our community members to Mexico City, it was really awesome. Now, I will say that route ended up failing. I left and the airline actually went under. It was Aeromar. So, some of it was a really cool project for me. It didn't really work there, but now they have new service in Laredo. I keep kind of track of what they're doing. And they fly to Monterrey, Mexico, and it looks like that's working really well for them. But that was, that it's cool, and it's also, you learn from each one of these lessons because your career, when probably not you, you seem savvy enough. But when I started my career, I just kind of pictured it being this linear, right? I'm gonna just take off, and this is the route I'm gonna go, and that's what I want to do. And my ultimate goal was to be an airport manager, which I did eventually get to that. But there's points in your career when I was, and I've never been shy about this. When I was in Pittsburgh, my role was terminated there, and so it puts you in a position, right, where you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And I think that's a lot of things that people, they're embarrassed, and because it's like, oh, what, was it something I did, or, and there was, in my case, really no explanation. And a lot of people were removed from that airport over time. And so it kind of does put you into this headspace. And Laredo was fortunate enough. I went from that role to being an airport director. And then I got there, right? And I'm like, okay, I got to, get airlines in, and I got to do real estate development. And, you start to learn and hone in on those skills over time. But I think, again, for me in this industry, getting to talk to real people in over 25 years, you get some really real conversations. And those I love the most. And by the time I got now to here in this role, this is part of the podcast, right? Because people ask me all the time. And I'm like, it's not an I Got You podcast or anything like that. I was like, but I think when you look at a lot of what our industry does, it's very robotic, right? And it's like, I've been successful the whole time in my career. But, you're going to have moments where you're going to doubt yourself. You're going to question things. You're going to say, is this role right for me? And, over time, you develop those skills, you bring it in, and then I think it makes you a well-rounded individual. And people, quite honestly, respond very well to someone who's going to be upfront and honest about it, who they are, and what they're doing, which is part of why I wanted you on the show, because I love this interaction. I loved our interaction at Atlanta, but I love, one, how you're new into the industry, what you're looking like, oh, this is where maybe I want to go, this is what I want to do. And it reminds me of, when I was at your stage, again, of course, a little while back, but still, I look at what you do, and I'm so excited for you that you have an opportunity really to say, blank slate, where do I want to go and what I want to do. So I love that. So again, I'm very long-winded. You can feel free to cut me off at any point, Lauren. The podcast is yours now. But that would be my answer. It's probably a collection of thoughts, a collection of feelings. And the reason why I wanted to say it didn't work with Aeromar is because that project wasn't a resounding success on paper necessarily, right? It didn't end up staying. But, seeing the end result and seeing, oh, I developed, again, like land, a route. There's a plane flying into this airport, going to another country that people can fly on. That was a really cool moment, and that you can kind of see what you put together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was something I also took away from Atlanta. I was very nervous to go. I was unsure about, because I had just changed my major in March from airport management because I didn't want to fly.
Okay.
So I felt kind of like, what am I going to do? I don't even know what type of jobs there are. I feel like I'm behind. I need to get an internship. I'm graduating next year. I'm scrambling.
Right.
But everybody there was so kind and welcoming, and they had kind of the same sentiment as you. We're so glad that you're here. And it just made me so excited to go into the industry. I was like, I'm going to be working with these people. And yeah. I mean, the energy was really, really good.
I love that. Yeah, it is. There's some amazing people in this side of the industry, and the nice thing too. I don't know. Did you get your private pilot license, or have you?
No, that's actually why I switched my major, because I'm just not interested in flying.
Okay.
I don't have an affinity for it, so I just.
Well, I'll tell you this: there's way more airport directors that don't fly than there are that do. And I think at the end of the day, it's obvious, your perspective, what you do. I think I've hit a balance with it because I do like to fly, but obviously, when I started my career, being a pilot, salary wise, was atrocious. I had some friends making $15,000 a year,
Oh,
and
wow.
they couldn't even sign for an apartment because the salary is so bad. Obviously, we're in a different time now, but I do love because in the industry too, things are secular and things come back, and having a backup plan. And I love to be in aviation. I love what I do now because I do get to touch a lot of different areas, and I get to sit down with our air traffic manager and have a conversation about our approaches and procedures at the airport. Talk with Customs and Border Patrol about our hours at the airport, our clearance times, how quick we're turning an aircraft, getting into some of the analysis of the data of who uses, our federal inspection station and where are they coming from. And so again, every day is a little bit different. And then I get to fly for recreation, right? I get to fly for fun. And the first job that I had, my boss, the airport manager, he also owned the FBO and he flew charter. And he also did airplane rides and stuff like that. And by the time I had started working for him, he had been in the industry for a few decades, and it had really just turned into a job for him. He didn't like flying anymore. It was a job, and so I always in my mind I'm like, well, putting the piloting stuff to the side and then going down this track, I still can do it, and it's kind of a release for me now, right? If I get kind of too stressed out with something throughout the day, if the plane's available, I can book it, rent it, and go up for a flight, and I'm like, okay, I'm resetting myself. But it is, again, you don't have to fly for it. But if in my career, when I was going to school, I couldn't afford to pay for pilot training when I put myself through college, and so I had to wait. So I started learning to fly, actually in California, just south of where your family is, down in San Jose, at Reed Hillview Airport. But it was something later in life, but it gave me that kind of perspective of this is, my career as the airport, but it also gave me a level, I don't want to say street cred is the right, but when I was working in Stockton, California, a lot of my job was enforcing rules at the airport, which you can imagine probably like, was that an RA in a dorm, how popular they can be. If you're the one enforcing rules, right? Like, hey guys, can't have beer in your hangar, right? Everybody loves that guy. And so it was somewhat of a difficult job sometimes, right? Because you have to tell people, things like, hey, you need to wait at a gate. Hey, you can't let your dog run around the runway with not a leash on, right? That could be an issue. All these things that you start going through your career and you're like trying to build who you are. But what I heard a lot was, oh, well, you're not a pilot, so you wouldn't know, Jeff. You wouldn't know a dog not on a leash by a runway. I'm a pilot. That's not really a safety hazard. Well, now that I fly, I can be like, no, my common sense at the beginning was right. You need to have your dog not even,
Right,
if you're bringing it
right.
into the airport, don't let it run up and down the runway. Common sense stuff. But being a pilot, I think sometimes allows me to, I don't know if speak the language the right word, but at least, especially like an airport like ours, you're like, yeah, I fly and I can understand your perspective, but here's my perspective with it. But
Yeah.
there's so many people that don't fly and then are on these roles that do amazing jobs, and so it's such a rewarding career field. And again, I will echo the sentiment of what my peers had said to you at that conference, and I'm really glad that you chose this pathway.
Yes. I had no idea you were at Stockton for a while.
I was Stockton, California.
Then I can be honest with you and say I live in Lodi
Oh,
now. I was
Lodi.
born
Yeah.
and raised in Sacramento, but
Yes, I hear Lodi is quite the wine capital of the world now.
it is,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Well,
So,
and I went to high school in Stockton, so
oh, you
that's
did?
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, St. Mary's High School.
The thing that I loved about Stockton was it was so close to everything, right? You could go over to, Lake Tahoe. You could go over to, San Francisco. And it was funny because, living in the San Joaquin Valley, the first year I was there, I think it was like 90 degrees. It was hot. It was sunny. Right. And I hit the weekend. I just started working at the airport and I was telling people in the front office, I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it's going to be 90 this weekend. I'm like, I'm going to the ocean. It's going to be great. And they're like, you're going to be a sweater? And I was like, why would I bring a sweater? It's like 90 degrees. And this is just being an idiot. And so I drove to Half Moon Bay and I'm like, oh, wait, it's overcast and there's this marine fog and it's like 55 degrees. So I learned quickly that it may be 90 degrees in the San Joaquin Valley, but that doesn't necessarily equate to, a couple hours away on the coast.
Yeah, what's that quote? The coldest winter I've ever had was summer in San Francisco.
You know what? And that all makes sense now. I forget who said that, but yeah, I was like, oh yeah, right. But and even that was interesting. So when I worked in Stockton, I eventually ended up moving over to San Jose and working at the San Jose airport. And I actually lived on a boat in the San Francisco Bay, so I had it at a marina. And then on the weekends, I would go out on the boat and I would park it like off of San Francisco or Oakland Airport and watch the arrivals come in. And it was a 40-foot boat with a about 14-foot wide, and so it was cool. It had a living space on it. If the thing about California, the thing about San Jose in that area, so beautiful, so nice, but it's hard in the airport side. You mentioned this early on. To really, okay, I can buy a house, I can do this, I can do that. And that made it, kind of difficult as to work in the airport and be like, oh, I could have this future here because I can afford this. It's so expensive to buy a home out there. And you find that you do some unorthodox things like living on a boat, which ended up being really cool and fun.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, but that's actually where I ended up meeting Tim because I left San Jose and I moved to South Bend, Indiana. And of course, everybody would say to me, "You left California to come to Indiana?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because I can afford things like a house if I want and property." And so no, but it was, it was a really fun experience. Stockton was really fun. It was really challenging and kind of rewarding. I started my career painting hangers and cutting grass and doing a lot of those jobs at my local airport. But I always kind of considered my first real airport grown up job to be Stockton. And they had a lot, it was mostly a general aviation airport if you ever flew out of it. And they had Allegiant operating at the time to Las Vegas. I think they still do. But I think they have other airlines now. But so most of the airfield operated like general aviation, right? And so a lot of people, when we came in, we started it again, myself enforcing the rules about things like security identification display areas, because we did have that commercial wing, making me, again, the most popular guy in the airport. I also, if people weren't paying their bills, part of my job was serving them at their homes, which that was such a blast. I was told to go F myself many times. And right, the bill man comes up to your house and like, hey, you owe something.
Oh, wow.
Nobody likes that guy. But again, it builds some skill, right? And we had to do it, right? You can't just let that stuff languish. You have to, get things paid. Got to pay bills. So, but,
yeah.
So Lodi, I most recently with Lodi, somebody told me that that's where they buy all their wine now. And when I lived in Stockton, I mean, I'm not a huge wine connoisseur, but obviously Napa Valley, all that. But I don't know if you've heard that back home, but that it's really turned into people. I guess the climate there is perfect for growing grapes. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I live like kind of in like the country. I live on like 5 acres, so
oh, perfect.
So there's about 15 wineries within 5 minutes of me. Yeah.
Now, do you like wine?
I'm not 21, so I'm not allowed to answer that.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yep, never had a drop of it. Fair enough. Yep. Well, when you do, if you ever know what it tastes like, you'll come back on the show and you'll let me know.
Okay, perfect.
What that experience was like. What else do you have for me, Lauren?
Yeah. What was a major, I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what was like a major setback in your career and how did you overcome it and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, getting terminated, it's difficult, right? It puts you in a weird headset.
Because you got terminated from Pittsburgh, you said, right?
Correct. Yep. So I was at, and I really did enjoy my role in Pittsburgh. I enjoyed what I did there. A lot of the people I enjoyed working with. I didn't see necessarily things eye to eye with some of the stuff that was happening within the airport, but there was a great team that I worked with, a lot of really good people. But it is, right? I mean, it's very personal, right? Like when it happens, it's kind of a surreal moment. You're like, oh, I didn't expect it. I was going, I had a house, and for all intended purposes, I was planning to stay there. And then you find yourself kind of in a position where you're like, okay, what's going to happen in my career? And I think too, the reason why I'm so open about talking about it is a lot of people go through it, and it's embarrassing in a lot of ways, right? Because you're like, what did I do? And I think that, for me with that experience, what I would say to it is probably know your organization. If you're not aligning with visions and what you think, or maybe it's the right things to do in aviation, it's possible. I think at that point, then you can say I need to find something that maybe suits what my personality is. I went through probably after that, right? About 20, probably 20 job applications, and 19 out of 20, swing and a miss. And so you start like, okay, you don't have a job anymore. You're on unemployment. Started renting my house that I had owned, moved into my brother's house. Great at this point in your life, right? Like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm living with my brother in my 30s. And he doesn't want that. His wife doesn't want that, right? Like, when's your brother moving out? So I was flying all over the country doing interviews. And I was lucky enough that, so Laredo was interesting. And Laredo had the job only, this is probably the secret to me getting to Laredo, is I was deep in everything, right? Your typical spots where you look, AAA job seeker, 80K, all this stuff. I was deep in Indeed one night, like really deep, like, so going through, there's a job, right? So, too bad for their part. They didn't get a better candidate than me. But they buried this thing in Indeed, and I found it, and it said, I think that if I remember right with the ad, it said something like, we're looking for an airport director, submit your resume, cover letter. And I did. And then this little bubble pops up, and it has like a geographical tag over the Laredo International Airport, right? And it's like, okay, now come to the job bulletin and like grab an application and fill it out. And I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like, well, I'm not driving to Laredo, because I looked on Google Maps. I'm like, how far is that from Ohio? Okay, it's like 26 hours. Well, I'm not driving down there to grab a job application off the board. So at that point, I just assumed not going to happen, right? So they call me up, do an interview. I do one interview over the web. They offer me the job. And they offered, at the time, it was, they started me out at 115,000 Laredo. So when I left Pittsburgh, I was around, I think 93,000 was my final salary. So then I was like, oh, I got to win. I'm getting more money. I'm going to be in charge of an airport. And I moved down to Laredo. And Laredo was interesting in itself, because it's like you live in the United States, but the federal government doesn't trust you completely, because like when you go through the airport, you go through TSA, but you have to go through Border Patrol, and it's non-invasive. It's just, are you a U.S. citizen? You say yes, and usually they let you go. Sometimes they'll ask you some questions.
Okay.
And then the same when you leave town. You get 20 to 25 miles from the border, you actually have to stop again, and same thing, talk to them, and they have the right to, tell you to pull over, and they can ask you further questions. So it's interesting in that perspective. It's 96% Hispanic, a lot of ties to Mexico, obviously, and it was a really cool experience that it turned into. It's not anywhere where I thought my career was going to go. I really was like, oh, I'm in Pittsburgh. I bought my house. I think I'm doing a good job here. People seem to generally like me. Not saying everybody liked me, but people seem to generally like me. And, things are going well. And then, you end up getting fired. And then you're like, what am I going to do with my life? When, how am I, you're doing job interviews and you're not getting something. And so, it really ended up being rewarding. And then this job came open, and I love where I am now, because it's really, Laredo was a city-run airport. And so people ask me all the time about my career. What would you rather work at a bigger airport, medium airport, small airport? For me, it's all about the governing structure. And quite honestly, I wouldn't want to probably work for an airport again that's city or county run directly. And I'd say never. You never know how life's going to go. But this job here that I have now, and I just thought of this the other day, because somebody reached out to me that works at the JFK airport, and they were asking for career advice and where to go. And so I was like, have you looked at AAA Job Seeker? And so I looked to make sure it was still there because I haven't looked at a job in 3.5 years. And it
Yeah.
just kind of resonated with me like, I'm in the right spot. This is where I want to be because I'm not out searching, I'm not looking. And so I guess I would say overall in your career, you may think, that progress is linear, but a lot of times it's not, right? And your career is going to take some turns. But the stuff that happened in Pittsburgh really for me gave me such an opportunity in Laredo to excel my career. And so a job I would have never even really been looking for, right? Because I was deep into Indeed to find that job. It
Yeah.
really ended up being rewarding and a great experience. And so I would say for your own career, what maybe looks like could be a setback might be a blessing in disguise, or in aviation, disguise in the up above us.
Well, I just like, as somebody who still needs to get their big girl job, I just like love hearing the like, yes, like tell me about the times that you failed, and like tell me about the times it exploded in your face, because it makes it like less scary for me, because I know that's inevitable, like it's gonna happen for everybody. But
Yeah, yeah.
everybody talks, like people come to my college talking about, oh, here's who I am and here's why I'm so great. And it's like, I'm not great. Like I don't know what to do now. Like tell me about the times that you failed, because then when I fail, I can be like, no, it's fine. We can overcome this.
Oh
And
yeah. No, and
yeah.
I think your attitude there is perfect for this industry because there are some people like when I go to Triple E, right? And you'll look around, you'll be like, okay, that person I'm going to have a very fake conversation with, and not my side to it because I usually talk like I do here. Anybody that knows me, maybe sometimes like Jeff, stop talking so much. But you look across the room and you spot someone, and you're like, oh, that person I can have a real conversation with. And that's it, because again, we're all human, right? And if you're not talking about those times, then the reality is, the rest of your stuff you're saying, at least for me, you're like, okay, not that it's necessarily maybe questionable, but you're gonna filter it down to the highlight. If you're gonna talk to someone and it's gonna sound like their LinkedIn profile, right? Be like, oh, I could have read that on LinkedIn. And I love, especially when you go and do some of the networking, items, especially now at this point in my career, to be like, hey, have you dealt with that? Have you dealt with this? We all have, like bad leases, right? And you inherit a bad lease and you're going through it like, who the heck wrote this thing? And so, it gives you that kind of, open honesty, and that becomes my network, right? Those are the people that I'll lean on because I know they're going to tell me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that
Yeah.
I love, and I cherish those moments because those help me more in my career than anything else. And, again, knowing that, we all kind of go through the same thing, right? And I think when you realize some of that, maybe, okay, I expected something to work out that didn't. And then we're all human and we have to figure out emotionally how we're going to deal with it. But the fact that you have that perspective, I think up front is going to be very rewarding for you in your career, because people really tend to resonate towards that individual. And so I do think you'll probably be very successful there. There will be, those moments where something didn't quite work right, or maybe you didn't connect the way that you thought you were going to on a certain project or with a certain individual. But overall, those moments, I know it's cliche, they built me into who I am, but I will say you learn from them, right? And also too, the further along you go in your career, like the point that I'm at now, there's so many jobs that I would never take, and it's funny because for me, you find yourself in a position earlier in your career where you're like, I want to work, I want to do something, give me something somewhere. And then you get to a certain point where you get offered a lot of stuff and you're like, no, I'm good. Like, I like where I'm at and I like what I'm doing. But it's funny because as you look at it, you're like, well, when I was really struggling, where were you at then to offer me that gig? But,
Yeah.
again, it's one of those exciting things as you find what really works for you. And, coming into this role, right, I was thinking in my head, right, I'm like, okay, well, I'm at a commercial airport. Should I spend more time here? And should I go on that trajectory to want to, be a director at a commercial airport? Chicago Executive Airport is just general aviation. So all that was in my head. And the board of directors that I work for were amazing. They made me feel very comfortable coming into the role. They made me feel like I was their person. They wanted me for the job. And then, we just built this relationship with the community and the board over the last few years that, like I said, to me, that the tall tale sign there was I haven't looked at a job board in 3.5 years. And it's been really nice because I think at some point in your career, you'll find yours, right? You'll be like, this is it. This is what I want to do. Then, for me at this point in my career, I was like, okay, so I'm an airport manager. I'm running executive director at this airport. What's next for me? Which now's the podcast, because I love this and I love just having real conversations with people. And the job I'm in now affords me the opportunity to do that. There's a lot of jobs that I've had, right, where if I went to the legal counsel and, the board of directors, they'd be like, no, you want to do a podcast and you want to say what? No way. But here, they couldn't have been more supportive. And so it's really been rewarding for this part of my career and talking to people like you. And, I love that, you have great mentors that you're talking with in the industry, and seeing where your career will take you is probably the most rewarding thing that I have at the moment. And at this stage of where I'm at in my career, I love that perspective selfishly for myself that I can see people like you, and because you remember, right? And it's not too far. I know we're, you can't drink yet, so you have no idea what alcohol tastes like. We've established that, but we're not too far apart and necessarily in the spectrum of time. And so I can remember that I was you, right? And I'm like, oh, where do I want to go? And what do I want to do? And so that's really cool to see that. And I love people like yourself that have the perspective that, hey, I want to get into it. I know maybe it's not always going to be perfect, but you're up for the challenge. And that's a great attitude.
Well, yeah, I'm like eager to get out there, especially after Atlanta. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. At first I was like, what do you mean I'm graduating in 3 years? Like, I don't ever want to leave. Like, what do you mean? And now I'm like, oh, one more year? Okay, sure, sign me up. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a good perspective. But what else? Do you have anything else for me on the question front?
I think like if 10 years ago, look back on yourself 10 years ago, what is one piece of advice you could give?
10 years ago, one piece of advice. Well, you have a lot of good questions. I'm going to be honest. I didn't know I'd be this much in the hot seat. Hot seat. Maybe 10 years ago.
That's my strategy. My strategy.
Yeah. 10 years ago, I would have told myself how to speak properly instead of saying hot seat instead of hot seat. No. It's interesting. It's funny because if you go back to yourself, I think a lot of stuff that has happened in my career at the time, what I warned myself, don't go there and don't do that. But I wouldn't have the memories of the people like in Pittsburgh that I really liked working with. And quite honestly, working there taught me a lot of things about how maybe I wanted to manage differently, maybe things that I didn't want to do. And, you learn lessons from everybody. So you can learn a lesson of, here's, maybe I was wrong and here's what I want to do differently. Or you can also learn, no, I don't like the way you manage and I don't like the ways that you treat people and what you do. And so I'm not going to do that for the rest of my career. So I think if I could just go back 10 years, I would, one, give myself a ton of stock tips. Kidding. What's funny is for the listeners, they don't know we just have to see that as a joke. Yeah. For the listeners, the camera froze and you were just like looking down like, oh my God, when's this interview going to be over? It was just frozen on the screen. But no, I think I would just say, don't stress too much and enjoy it, because quite honestly, it worked out perfectly after Pittsburgh. It was my last week that I could be on unemployment. And I got the job in Laredo, and then I was an airport director in really, I don't want to say a new country, but I traveled so much in Mexico. I got to meet so many amazing people. It was so much fun, and which led me to this role. So, I guess if I could just tell myself, hey, we've talked about this. Now you're going to have to go through it. Your career's not going to be exactly what you thought it was going to be. But at the end, it's going to turn out all right, but you're going to have to get through it over the next 10 years. And I think, that along with the stock tips, I would have been in a great spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have one more question
Ooh,
for you.
hey, you could ask as many questions as you want. The thing on my podcast, people ask me this all the time. They're like, well, Jeff, what can we really, I'm like, listen, you can expect whatever you want. It can be whatever you want it to look like, because again, this is a space that I've created, because so much of my jobs that I've had, or if you're in this career field, the reality is no matter how much freedom you have, it is a job, and there are certain things that you have to do, and you have to have certain standards and times, and this is when we do this and this is when we do that, especially in aviation, right? A lot of it's very regulated, and you do get to have some autonomy and stuff. But this space, this destination aviation space, what we're doing right now is exactly what I want. So you feel no pressure. You ask as many questions as you want.
Okay, yes. So this is straying away from advice and career path, but what's a new airport technology or something that like an innovation that you'd like to see or you're excited to see?
Oh, there's so much that's out there, that's coming down. I will say AI for me has been very rewarding. Obviously, the warning signs of artificial intelligence, and how, I think every movie that was made on artificial intelligence goes bad, right? I can't think of one where it's like, we have robots that look, it's a utopia. No,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Every time James Cameron gets something together, it goes horribly bad. But this kind of immediate splash into things like Chat GPT and stuff, right? Like in my day job, we have a staff typically of around 13 people, so we're not internally a huge organization. But a lot of the stuff that I do, right? Like I'll write out a bunch of stuff, right? And then I'll run it through Chat GPT, if it's not sensitive information, if it's just like an email. Because then, what used to, like if I'm formulating an email, maybe, or, a document or something, maybe it would have taken me a couple hours. Like I just wrote a guidance document for one of the things that we're doing with an organization outside. So I'm on the Illinois Public Airports Association side. So I'm running that kind of stuff through, and formulating it to make it look better. And so I tell people, I'm like, you still have to write it, you still have to put the content together, but you don't have to necessarily, okay, I got a comma here and a period there. So it's made my job so much more efficient, because rather than, I'm not an English professor, right? And so like, okay, do I put a dot and comma over here? No, I write out in my mind what I want it to look like, and then run it through, and then you have to go back through and edit it. But it takes, I would say it reduces, for me, usually 75% of the time I would spend on any certain item. And so as that technology continues to expand, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that continues to augment our jobs. And at this point in my career, I'm really looking at it as, maybe an assistant. Because a lot of times when you're, in roles, like I've had official assistants in jobs, and it's hard for someone to get in your headspace. But with artificial intelligence, you're kind of just, okay, I'm writing out what I want. Here it is. And so as we start to see that come into all of our applications, right? Whether it's our airfield inspections, if you're at a commercial airport, things like baggage displays, there's so much information that you can get now at your fingertips. That I'm at least embracing what that is at the moment, because it's like, this is for your job. And I tell people, because some people be like, that's cheating. I'm like, oh, no, okay, I'm not writing a term paper. I was like, if you want to use something to help augment, if I could take my productivity and get, 4 or 5 things done within the same amount of time, maybe I was doing one thing because I'm going back and rechecking or whatever. I think proficient wise, that's a knock out of the park. But it is one of those technologies that I think, we hear a lot, and I'm on the Advanced Air Mobility Working Group for the state of Illinois. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing like on that front. But I'd say what's impacting my daily life right now is really this taking off of artificial intelligence. And it's really helping, the job, especially like ours, smaller staff and stuff. And again, I think with our inspection software systems, to see where it can go. And I had some of this realization actually when I fly myself. Um, when I was in San Jose, the 787 had just really started. When I was in Stockton, they were still testing it. When I got to San Jose around like 2012, the aircraft, All Nippon Airways was actually flying it. But they let me get into the flight deck, and I'm looking at, this comparative to what I was flying a Remos at the time to train. And I'm like, holy crap, like, look at all this. They got a moving map. And so when I got to Chicago Executive Airport, I showed up to do my biannual, and the individual doing it, probably closer to your age, I showed up, with my chart supplement and my sectional. I'm like, oh yeah, look, it's nice and fresh. And he's like, what the heck is all that? He's like, just go get ForeFlight. And I'm like, ForeFlight? And he's like, yeah. And from that time that I remember the 787, because I didn't fly when I was in Laredo. I flew when I was in Pittsburgh, but in Laredo I took some time off just because it was so hot. I often say Laredo's that white part on the map where it's like 120 degrees. They don't even have purple anymore. They just have a white color.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's so hot. It's like, I'm not going to be sitting in the 172 down here. But, technology advanced so much that, now when I fly, I have ForeFlight, I have a Sentry ADS-B antenna, and so I can see all the traffic around me. I can, the airspace, the chart supplements in there, weather. And so it's the same kind of thing that all of this technology has, condensed down to where someone like me can afford and use it. And I look that's kind of similar with, the artificial intelligence side to it in airports. So I'm really excited to see, I think over the next few years, a lot of like the vendors and stuff we saw at the AAA annual, I think their products are going to, continue to evolve rapidly now that we're in this space. So that's what I would say is probably where I'm looking at technology that's like, if you get into our side of this, what I think is going to be really helpful probably in our roles and how we manage these airports, especially if you find yourself, and I hope at some point, running a general aviation airport. Not that any bias here.
No bias.
You go run any airport you want.
Yeah. I really like that perspective because in college, it's like you're shamed for like using AI for anything. But then I talk to like professionals in the industry and they're like, oh yeah, I use AI just to summarize things and to, like you said, draft emails and things like that. And I think that's it's nice to put that perspective on it. Like it's not all bad or,
and that's the thing. I think that, right, there's a part of learning, and I think, that we can all understand, but using it as a resource, as a tool, because even in ours, right, people will, I mentioned it and they'll be like, oh, it's taboo. Like, no, like you still have to do the work. Like, it doesn't know what you're going to say, and then you have to go through and edit it. But what it does is, I didn't go to school to be an English professor. This has never been my strong suit. And so, if I can write out something that I, to the point about laying something out, and you want to flush it through and make it look more condensed and neat and flow better, I can really just free flow on mine then. I can write up something quickly and then run it through. And we see these applications now getting put on Microsoft Office. And so it really, the technology is adapting to where you as the human being are still there, and you need to be driving it, and you need to be figuring out what your message is. But this can help you craft it better. And, again, it just increases the productivity. So another honest conversation, because I'm sure a lot of people, I would never, okay, yeah, you would never would, but you probably will. It is what it is. And, if we can embrace it, and maybe it won't go as bad as like Terminator or Terminator 2 or of the other 50 Terminators there are.
Well, I just love that perspective because it's realistic, and we're using technology. If it's at our fingertips, why not?
Exactly. Why not?
That's how innovation happens.
It is. Is that the last question?
That wraps up my questions.
I love it. I love, again, one, your ambition for our side of the industry. I love that you've taken the time to get on Destination Aviation with us. So to remind the listeners, Lauren, and you are Lauren Carter, you are on LinkedIn, correct?
I am, yes.
Would you like me to put your profile link in the show notes so anybody that's listening, if they're so interested?
That would make me feel so popular.
Well, you're going to be popular. It's going to be amazing, and people are going to they're going to snatch you up and put you at whatever airport you probably want to go to. And
one can hope.
Oh, I think you'll be just fine. I really do. And it will be a very rewarding career field for you. And you always can come back onto the show at some point. Actually, that would be fantastic. Get your first job, get your feet wet, come back on the show, tell us how it's going.
That would be great. Yes.
Is there anything, I know I talked a lot, but is there anything I didn't ask you or something that you want the listeners to know, or did we wrap it up very well there?
No, I think I said my piece, and I wanted you to talk the whole time, so I did a great job.
No, you did a phenomenal job. You did a fantastic job. I loved all
I met my goals. I was like, my strategy is to just have him talk the whole time.
Well, anybody that actually knows me, that's not too much of a challenge, but you were up for it and you took it. You know, you could have been like, Jeff, what's your favorite rock? And I would have been talking about Plato and be like, well, you know, one time in 1989, I actually had a pet rock, and it was my best friend.
I love that. I too. I can talk for ages. So
well, that's probably why we got along so well at the lunch table. We're at lunch table.
Yes.
No, I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking your time on this podcast with us today. We will put Lauren's notes on the show description. And Lauren, you're graduating, remember, May 2026, correct?
Yes.
Are you looking for any internships between now and May 2026, or is it just looking for a job after May 2026?
I think right now we're looking for a job.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, I'll put your notes in there. Anybody that wants to hire Lauren, please do. I can vouch for her here over the air. Thank you so much for being on Destination Aviation, Lauren.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Well, that was great. We had a fantastic time with Lauren. I hope you all learned some stuff me along the way. I learned some stuff. And don't forget that Lauren is graduating May of next year, so if you're looking to hire someone, I will put her LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So hire her. She sounds like a good one. Snatch her up before somebody else does. So thank you so much for tuning in Destination Aviation. I will be back now home, driving home, getting ready to go home on the road. And we have a couple more interviews that are coming up on the show. So if you haven't, please subscribe to the show. Tell some friends you love the show. Tell some enemies you love the show. Drop us a line at dapodcast85@gmail.com. And that's your source for anything you want to say. You want suggestions for future shows, whatever it might be. And we'll have a more just regular Me, Jeff show soon. We do have some interviews that we've taped. We'll have one that we'll be taping again. So I'll try to put one in, though, to answer some of the questions that have been coming in. I know I keep promising to do that. So I will get on that. Thank you for tuning in today, everyone. Until next time, my friends, I will see you down the runway.